Hey, what's going on, everyone? Thank you for coming to watch. So we've got an update on a significant severe weather outbreak that's expected to take place across the central United States. As we get into Tuesday, we're talking about a multi-day severe weather event that could last even into Wednesday. I've got all the details coming right up. So there's going to be here on this Sunday evening. We have a lot to talk about in this video. Again, we're going to be going over all of the latest details on what this pretty significant severe weather sequence is going to be bringing us, again, for folks across the central United States. So let's get right into the video. So we're going to start here by taking a look at your current satellite. You can see that our weather across the United States, as we get into tonight and we wrap up this weekend, it is pretty quiet. You can see that as of right now, we do have a couple of showers and even some snow showers mixing across the northern United States, and these are continuing to move off to the east. I do think we could see some lake effect snow or possibly even just some rain across portions of Michigan, Wisconsin, back into northern Ohio and far western Pennsylvania. You can see that our old line of showers and what used to be thunderstorms is now working its way off the East Coast, so we are wrapping up a pretty soggy Sunday afternoon and evening for our folks in the Carolinas and the Mid-Atlantic. But again, the rest of the country looks pretty quiet, pretty nice today for our folks. We saw very above average temperatures across the eastern United States, so pretty nice to see, again, the calm weather return to, again, the bulk of the country. So, move on here to our latest alerts. You can see that we do have a little bit going on as far as our non-precipitation alerts are concerned. We can see that we do have red flag warnings up for portions of the Nebraska Sandhills, so portions of western Nebraska back into portions of eastern Wyoming. So anywhere in that hot pink shade, that is where you do have the red flag warnings. We're expecting an increase in elevated fire threat for today, and this will eventually lead into the beginning of the week, as we are going to be talking about once again drier than average conditions with also the very gusty winds. You can see we do also still have those red flag warnings up for portions of eastern Mexico, southern Colorado. The mountainous regions of the western United States have gotten absolutely pounded by this drought. I was out into Colorado for a couple days earlier in February, and I'll tell you, the entire ground is just dead. I mean, the grass is dead, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. It was super dry out. We actually did have even a small brush fire breakout in an area that was not too far away from the hotel I was staying at. We could actually see it from the top of the hotel. So basically, I'm just trying to give you guys an example of how dry these conditions are. But you can see we also do have some dense fog advisories across portions of southeast Louisiana, southern Mississippi, and southern Alabama. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So move on here to our latest SPC outlook. We're actually going to switch this to the day 3 outlook, and you can see that we currently do have a level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk for severe weather, including portions of northern Illinois and portions of northeastern Missouri. So this is a pretty new update to our SPC outlook for, again, this is going to be Tuesday, and you can see this does include places like Springfield, Illinois, Peoria, Illinois, Bloomington, Illinois, Normal, Illinois, and Quincy, Illinois. So a lot of northern Illinois is going to be placed under this threat for severe weather, and we almost have 2 million people under a pretty high threat for severe storms on Tuesday, so definitely a big threat there. But look at our slight risk. This is a level 2 out of 5 risk in the yellow shade. This is much more expansive. This extends all the way from southern Michigan down to the border here from Texas to Mexico here, so south of Fort Stockton all the way up to the Chicago area is where we have our slight risk. That includes almost 48 million people, so you can just see that our threat area for Tuesday is going to be very, very large. And again, this is only our day 3 outlook, so keep in mind, a lot of changes are going to be possible to this, and perhaps we even get an upgrade to this. We'll have to see, again, what happens with our model trends. But if you look at our probabilistics, we currently do have a 30% hatch threat for seeing severe thunderstorms within 25 miles of a given location for our northern target. Then you can see our southern mode also does have a 15% hatch threat for seeing severe thunderstorms within 25 miles of a given location. So definitely a very elevated to potentially significant severe weather threat coming up on Tuesday. Now, another thing I do want to mention is if we look at our day 4 to 8 outlook, this is our day 4 outlook, so the next day, this is going to be in our Wednesday, we have another slight risk for severe weather, but this time it is a 15% chance for severe weather. So because on day 4 to 8, the SPC only releases 15 to 30% outlooks, we do have a 15% chance for severe weather extending all the way from southwest PA down to portions of northern Louisiana. Yet again, another very large severe weather threat, very elevated here, potentially significant as we get into Thursday. Again, this is already day 4, so we still have 4 days to go until we get to this day here, which means that a couple of changes are definitely going to be possible possible. So, once again, when you see a very large, severe weather threat this far out, you know that, a big event is coming up, but also a lot of changes are going to be possible between now and the next 3 to 4 days. So to get started with our forecast, we're going to be taking a look at our latest European model for your 500 millibar height anomalies. Excuse me, not your anomalies, your 500 millibar height winds. So these are going to be your mid to upper level winds aloft. This is what your jet stream is going to look like, and what you're looking for is what we call a trough, or an area of more spin vorticity and just stronger 500 millibar jet stream winds. And you can see we already do have one digging down here into portions of western Mexico, Baja California, and we're watching as this continues to dig into the southwest United States and eventually ejects into the central U.S. as we get into the beginning of the week. So we're already getting into Tuesday here, and you can see our trough is beginning to slowly but surely work its way into the central United States. And look how fast that connection between the trough and the jet stream happens. You can see we already do have a very strong jet streak across portions of the central United States, and you can see it is already connecting to our northern stream as early as Tuesday evening here, and that does bring definitely an elevated jet streak, or at least stronger jet streak, to our folks out here in the lower Midwest, which is our highlighted area for severe weather on Tuesday. And I do want to mention that I do think that the southern mode could definitely uptrend here, because that is going to be the area that is under concern, at least for where our trough is going to be lining up with. You can see that we do end up seeing the front of the trough impact portions of the deep south there. So I am wondering if we are going to see, again, if we do end up seeing overlapping strong mid to upper level winds with very, very subtle warming and dew points. I do think that if we do end up seeing those two kind of parameters overlap, we could end up seeing a slightly more elevated severe weather threat for our southern mode, which again is going to be located in Texas and Oklahoma. But again, this is as we're getting to Tuesday evening. Watch as this progresses. Now we're getting to Wednesday morning. Again, this is going to be our day 2 of our multi-day severe weather event. So this is going to be what we were looking at on the day 4 SPC outlook. I know that didn't make any sense. So Tuesday is going to be our day 3, and then Wednesday is going to be our day 4 outlook. This is the 15% chance that we were just talking about. You can see our trough continues to move east, and look at our jet streak. This is very, very strong. Your winds aloft are approaching 95 knots. This is definitely very significant when you have dew points ranging from the low 60s to the upper 70s potentially, or not upper 70s, excuse me, the low 70s. Again, if you get those two parameters to overlap, big things can happen. But the bulk of our trough, at least, the more interesting part of our trough, if you will, it's located down here in the deep south. So considering that we likely are going to see the most moisture down there and potentially the strongest part of our trough, if those two parameters overlap, which I said earlier, that could end up creating definitely a significant severe weather event, again, for areas a little bit farther south. So we do need to definitely continue to monitor that. Now, do we know what the storm is going to be like? No, but I definitely do think that if it is more discrete in nature, these storms, yes, we could see a pretty elevated tornado threat. So that is definitely something to put into consideration there. But we move on now to, once again, the European model, but now at our, looking at our 2 meter dew points here. And you can see that we push this into really Tuesday morning. You can see already our warm sector is going to look very significant. This is, again, as we're getting to the early afternoon and the late morning, early afternoon hours of Tuesday, you can see our dew points already well into the lower 60s across all of the lower Midwest here, as well as portions of the Ohio Valley. But once again, we're watching for our folks out here into northern Illinois. That's where the enhanced risk is currently placed by the SPC. And you can see in no time our dew points explode into the low 60s, upper 50s, which is already going to be very conducive for severe weather. And that's exactly when our jet streak is going to peak here. And you got to keep in mind that our storms are likely going to be moving through portions of northeast Missouri and north central Illinois. So if you have dew points into the lower 60s in this area with a very strong jet streak, you are definitely going to have big problems because of that. But you can see as we get into Wednesday, our warm sector is going to be pushed off to the east, and eventually that is going to allow for those storms to impact the Ohio Valley, and that's where we do have the 15% chance for severe weather. It still does bring a pretty incredible amount of moisture, at least for this time of year. It brings dew points into the lower 60s as far north as western Pennsylvania. And keep in mind, this area just saw snow a couple weeks ago, so it's pretty wild that you're talking about a legitimate severe weather threat, not long after you saw a pretty significant winter storm. So definitely an interesting severe weather threat to watch, and then eventually your cold front crashes through, and you're left with very dry and much cooler air. But we now look at the latest RRFS experimental 12Z model run here for your wind shears. So we do have, again, one convective available model here, which is our mid-range Rufus. Now, this model is notorious for being a little bit more aggressive on severe weather events, so definitely keep that in the back of your mind. Take everything you see with a grain of salt, but this is the most high-res kind of model solution that we can get this far out, and we can take a look at what it shows as far as our wind shear is concerned. So again, wind shear is a huge factor when you're considering, taking a look at what the chances are for storms to rotate, what the chances are for storms to spin, and you can see that as we push this out into the time frame of importance here, we get into Tuesday evening. This is right when storms are expected to fire, and you can see that our wind shear is going to be incredibly strong out here. You can see we already do have widespread 40 to 60 knots of shear overspreading the area here. So from northeast Missouri to central Illinois, you are talking about, again, widespread 40 to 60 knots, which is very conducive when you're considering, again, 60-degree dew points overlapping this kind of area. And you can see that if we push this even further, this is when all of our storms are going to develop. You can see they will be moving into a much more sheared environment. Now, there is a point where we could have too much wind shear, where storms just get ripped apart. There's a meteorological sweet spot between wind shear. You don't want too little wind shear, because that means that you're going to get storms, but they're not going to be able to rotate because you don't have winds changing in height and in direction. You don't have winds changing in direction with height. But you don't want too much wind shear where you just get storms that get shredded apart, like when you get hurricanes, because hurricanes are notorious for weakening out due to wind shear. So there's always a sweet spot in meteorology for storms to be able to produce tornadoes, and I would say that's roughly 30 to 60 knots of wind shear. Anything below 30 is considered pretty low. Anything above 60 is considered, pretty high. And you can see that as these storms begin to develop, they will enter a region of pretty strong wind shear here, which will be conducive for tornadoes. You're talking about generally 35 to 50 knots. But look north of where these storms are going. This is where our northern jet stream is going to be kind of intersecting our trough. You can see, just automatically our wind shear becomes very, very high. It spikes if you go any bit to the north here. You can see that our wind shear does approach 70 to 80 knots, and again, that is considered way too high for storms to be able to, keep progressing. So when you're also keeping in mind that, again, by the looks of it, these storms are going to be moving up into this area, will they get shredded apart quickly enough? I mean, that's the question. And you're also you got to keep in mind also that your dew points are not going to be able to get into the 60s and perhaps even into the 50s that far north. So the environment is going to be much less conducive for tornadoes if you go any farther north than really southern Wisconsin. And I do think that that's why the cutoff between the enhanced and really the marginal risk is fairly sharp. Again, there is still a slight risk in place for those areas, but I just think that, our environment could be a little too stable or at least to support those severe storms capable of producing tornadoes. But we now look at the latest RRFS once again, but now for our simulated radar. So this is what the latest RFS is putting out as far as what the possible outcome of this severe weather outbreak will look like. And you can see that as we push this into Tuesday, we'll get this all the way through Monday and eventually into Tuesday. This is as we're getting into Tuesday morning. This is right around 5 a.m. You can see we have completely clear skies out of this area, and then boom, you can see that as we get into around 5 p.m., so this would be 4 p.m. Central on Tuesday, You can see our first storms of the day fired. This one is a little stray supercell across portions of central Illinois with a bit of thunder showers behind it. So we'll see if that does end up happening, if it could stabilize the area. But you can see we also do have a small thunderstorm developing across southern Missouri. But look at the difference between this frame and the next couple of frames. We take this out into about late evening, early, nighttime hours of Tuesday. Look at these storms that fire across north central Illinois. You get already three dominant supercells to fire across northeast Missouri and northern Illinois. These would already definitely be able to produce tornadoes when you have, storms of this strength. And you can see we even do see that stray supercell continue to move east across portions of the Boot Heel of Missouri. So we'll see if that does pan out. But you can already see that our storms look a lot less concerning up to the north here, because they're just getting absolutely shredded apart by all the wind shear. And again, our dew points are not going to be super high all the way up there again so far north. But you can see that if we continue to kind of see what these storms do over northern Illinois, they do end up becoming very significant. Again, this is not quite into the area where we see extremely high wind shear, but man, I mean, this run of the RRFS shows an absolutely unbelievable scenario for our folks out here into southeastern Michigan, portions of northwest Indiana, and northern Illinois. Again, this does impact the Chicago area. We have, countless supercells that just break out across this region. I think that this, the sheer amount of supercells that the RFS is showing, it's obviously way too high, but that is definitely a signal for something big. If you're looking at just the possibility of several supercells across the region. Again, this would be right around 11 p.m. So unfortunately, in the overnight hours, you get a significant tornado outbreak likely with this, and you can see that we do end up seeing another round of strong to severe thunderstorms moving through on the backside of the storm system, and this would end up causing not only again another round of potentially damaging severe thunderstorms, but very, very dangerous, potentially life-threatening flash flooding. I mean, that is several hours of heavy, heavy rain. Again, all in a row there. Really not what you want to see, but again, unfortunately, that does look to be a pretty significant event across northern Illinois. And those storms do end up, moving pretty substantially before they get shredded apart all the way up to the north. So it is still a possibility that if we do see something like this happen, which I think would be the worst case scenario, obviously that would end up being pretty bad for folks out there in northern Illinois and Indiana. But we now look at our significant tornado parameter based off of the latest 12Z RRFS. This is the same model run we just looked at. And you can see our STP values do slowly rise as we get into the evening hours. Again, this is the exact same time frame that we were looking at when those storms initiated, 5 p.m. On Tuesday. You can see our STP values already rising to about 3 to 6 here across central Illinois, which is already elevated. But watch what happens as those storms begin to really fire off there. Boom. You can see that we just get a very concerning look. But you can see, look at our STP max. I don't know if you guys can see that. Look right by my camera right here. That max there is at 15.33. So if that does end up happening, where we do get observed STP values, really not observed, you can't really get observed STP values, but let's say for some crazy reason, you look at mesoanalysis and you see your STP values reach 15. In northern Illinois. Again, if we were to see something like this play out, this would certainly be a environment conducive of strong to potentially intense tornadoes. And again, these supercells are just going to eat up that environment. But this basically puts together all of the parameters we looked at and puts it all into one, and just gives us a idea of how good our environment is for tornadoes. And that is just unbelievable. You can see our more higher end numbers extend all the way from really all of central and northern Illinois back into northern Missouri. Very expansive area there, and that's just at 8 p.m. Again, the concerning time frame we looked at was 11, and you can see those storms continue. And this is as we're getting to 1 a.m. and you still do have elevated values across portions of northern Indiana and northern Illinois. So this is definitely something to put in consideration. Again, like I said earlier, take this all with a grain of salt. The RFS is notorious for overdoing severe weather events, but if this were to happen, where we do get a more higher end scenario, again, this would cause major problems for our folks there in Illinois and Indiana. But for the last part of the update, we now look at our RFS experimental updraft helicity tracks here, so this gives us an idea of where the RFS is predicting storms could go through that will end up spinning. Again, these are the tracks where we could see storms kind of develop that also will end up having the chance to produce tornadoes. You can see we have a very wide signal for spinning thunderstorms, again, rotating thunderstorms across all of northern Missouri, but definitely into western Illinois, northern Illinois, and north central Illinois. That is a major signal, and that expands significantly into northern Indiana and southern Michigan. So I do think that, yes, our wind shear definitely does hold very well across portions of, central Iowa and southern Wisconsin. Again, areas to the north. But if you're talking about areas to the northeast, not so much, because you can see there's still a very significant signal for our folks into southern Michigan. But you can also shift your attention down south. I mean, look at this. This is the beginning of Wednesday. We could actually see it already on the RFS, and this also shows a significant event panning out for Wednesday. So we'll get into more detail with that in a future video. But overall, again, the RFS is going all in for Tuesday. We'll just have to wait and see what the HRRR and the rest of the convective available models do show again as we get into tomorrow. And really, once we get into tomorrow, we'll have a better idea as to what is really going to be happening. But once again, make sure you take everything with a grain of salt. Don't be scared, be prepared. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you for coming to watch, and I'll see you guys in the next video.